Good afternoon, good evening, good midday, maybe even good morning to some of you. Thank you very much for joining this session that is going to let you into an understanding of a small snapshot of a project-oriented working week that we had here in school. My name is Tue Rabenhøj. I'm the head of the middle school here at the International School of Billund. And I am fortunately also still a teacher of social sciences and of music. So I would like to let you into this room and share with you some different thoughts and ideas that inspired and helped shape this week that we had. And at the core of this whole thing, at the heart of everything, is a week of which play with teenagers took a central place in learning. So it ended up being called Wonder Week. It was a project-oriented week for about 120 of our middle school students. That means aged from 11 to about 14 years old. And the International School of Billund, where I now work, is a place that was born with play at the heart of everything we do. So our mission statement is that we place play at the heart of education, and through that we try to stimulate every child's natural desire to learn. So our vision of doing this is that we hope to educate lifelong learners with compassion, with courage, and not the least with curiosity, as we all know that it's a driving factor for learning. So we are a school that explores and examines and inquires into what playful learning looks like, what it sounds like, maybe sometimes what it smells like, even with teenagers. So when we work in the middle years program, in the MYP, we usually write a statement of inquiry that sort of creates a focus for what it is that we teach, the specific unit that we are going to deliver. And I got inspired by a unit I once wrote about improvisational techniques in music. And my statement of inquiry looking into modal improvisation was that establishing parameters for improvisation can help free up creative processes. So in my mind, that harmonized really well with what I would like to try to do with this short presentation. And the focus for this, the statement of inquiry, if you like, is that establishing parameters for playful learning can help free up playful processes. Because here at ISB, we every year examine those paradoxes that are born into the difference between play and schools. So we have study groups every year that chooses different areas of interest that looks at this balance between play being timeless and players can lose themselves in play. It can also be chaotic, it can be messy, it can be loud, and it involves risks. And it very often lets children take charge. Now, whereas schools very often, we have timetables, we have structure, we very often need to be quiet and focused on what we do. We also need to keep children safe. And of course, we have preset learning goals, very often defined by the teacher. And we are also in a school where we prepare students to sit for international exams at the end of their course time here with us. So, how do these things harmonize? How can we explore this playing field? This is what an example could look like. And hopefully, even putting structures in place can help free up for playful learning. So, how did we get there? Well, the inspiration for this week came from a lot of different places. We were a small working group of 4 that helped shape this whole week and help planning it. And the inspiration we took from earlier passion days we have had in school, which are days where students meet up to pursue the passion for a day. A number of these spread out over the years. What about going to school and just explore something you always wanted to know more about or be interested in or had gotten inspired to find out about? It developed into project weeks where students composed their own schedules. When did they learn best? Or when did they learn best with others? Going on over weeks, and also taking into consideration the different ways of working that we noticed happen a lot during lockdown. And at the same time, we have also been fortunate enough to visit schools, for instance, the Wings in Agora, where they also worked a lot with teachers being coaches. They're not actually teachers, and students designing their own learning experiences. So all that put together with the small model you can see here, which is a model that practitioners here at ISB has developed through a lot of research projects. We have come up with this playing field of choice, wonder, and delight. And we think that when all these three things are present, there is a fairly good and strong chance of playful learning happens. So all these things, how could we then get these different elements to play together in this project week? How can they play together in order to inform and impact our planning and preparation, both with teachers and also with students? How could choice, wonder, and delight play different roles in the execution of the week, both for the students, but also for the teachers, who I should, of course, have called coaches in here? And what about reflection? Can we think playfulness, choice, wonder, delight into reflection, both with teachers and also with students? So that was a starting point of thinking a fairly rich picture of a lot of different stimuli that we wanted to help us shaping this week. Inspiration. So students showed up on Monday morning, and they had been given small blobs of inspiration, small different kind of teasers the week before, without being told what it was about. So when they met up Monday morning, there was a small video that sort of set the tone, where I tried to explain what this Wonder Week is about. So I'd just like to play that for you, and you can get an idea of how this whole week was introduced to both staff and also to students.
Hey Tue, what is Wonder Week?
Wonder Week is a week where students can choose something they're interested in. Something from out of the universe to inside the earth to inside the mind, or in their surroundings around them. Anything goes.
Hey Tue, how do I choose a topic in Wonder Week?
So a topic can be chosen by thinking of something you have experienced in your life that made you wonder, or maybe the global context can help you open up to think about the world around you or inside you that triggers imagination and questions that you've always wanted to know more about.
Hey Tue, what will teachers do on Wonder Week?
So during Wonder Week, teachers are not teachers, they are your coaches. They will not be teaching you like you usually do. You will be teaching yourself, but the coaches will be there to guide you along and to show you the path and help you see things clearly.
Hey Tue, how about timetables?
And working spaces.
So every morning and every day before students go home, they will check in with their coaches. Otherwise, students will be working all over school. They could be working in clusters, in classrooms, in creator spaces, in the music rooms, maybe in the school, food lab. They could be working doing PE. They could be working doing all sorts of different things, as long as it's safe.
Hey Tue, where can we find
information about Wonder Week?
If you feel lost and don't know what to do, all the information is in Google Classroom, set up especially for you. When are courses available? What are you supposed to do? How do you use your project planner to keep track of your project? When are you going to do something on Friday when you present things? All that is available right there in the Google Classroom. And on the display boards in front of which your beautiful coaches will be sitting ready to help and guide you through the entire process.
Hey Tue, are there any special rules about Wonder Week?
There are special rules for the Wonder Week. School will still give you snacks and lunch as usual, but you can bring in your own snacks or drinks if you like, as long as you keep places tidy. You can also bring in some pillows or blankets and things that help you cozy up to your work environment, as long as you remember to look after them. And teachers will not take phones away, as long as you don't take any pictures of others without permission, and you don't use your pictures to post them on social media. So this was just a small example that started as a small improvised message going out, but that included both students, primary teachers, secondary teachers, leadership, support and kitchen staff, from all walks of school life. So these things started popping up in the week before for students to have access to start to spark curiosity. And I did specifically told staff not to answer questions for students. See what you can figure out from information you have. And then you will take everything from there on a Monday morning. We introduced Monday morning with playing some Kahoot about the video. So here's just a snapshot of one of the questions asked, saying, what do teachers do in Wonder Week? So either teachers will just be like just regular teachers in a regular day, or teachers will wander around drinking coffee and pointing at things, or teachers will be your coaches, or teachers will tell you what to do at all times. So different playful ways of opening up for a lot of these questions that students were grappling with, what is going to happen and who is going to teach me and who is going to tell me what I can and can't do. So why were we doing this? Now, I spent considerable amount of time both with staff and beforehand, and of course also with students as the week progressed to find out and outline the field of why this is a really important week that features different elements that can help students become lifelong learners. So first of all, it is a part of our DNA here to think playful teaching and learning. Students should have the opportunities to develop ATL skills. That means thinking skills. It means self-management skills, communication, research, and social skills. They should also experience autonomy, independence, agency, responsibility. Some of those good buzzwords. Experience different teaching and learning roles, both with themselves and now with their coaches. And they should really get an experience of making learning relevant by linking their choice to the world outside. And develop a community of learners through individuality. So everybody did individual projects, but with lots of element of sharing your investigations and your learnings with the whole school community. And the most important word is the red one here, is to help build resilience. Not to have everything served on the plate, not to have a fishing net by a teacher standing ready to grab you every single time you tremble and fall in the process of learning. You need to try to be challenged in a way where you take risks and you might hurt your learning capabilities a little bit, but you still manage to overcome hurdles. Because especially after, I think, the Corona lockdown, we have a tremendous amount of young people who are suffering from big lacks of self-esteem, awkwardness in social interactions and so forth. And if we don't only react on this, then we have to be proactive, and proactive means to build up a sort of an armor of resilience where you can tackle and overcome hardness and difficulties. So what can we expect? Now, I went through this with teachers and we discussed it beforehand. And up here you can see a picture of a grade 8 student standing dressed up. And that was because her whole project week was about trying to get out of her comfort zone. So every day she asked peers or teachers to set different challenges, people who knew her, who would ask her to do things that she was really uncomfortable doing. And she did a whole research project into the psychology of comfort zone and stretch zones and learning. When is learning powerful? How far can you go outside your comfort zone and still be challenged and develop hard learnings? And can you actually learn something if you just stay within your own comfort zone? So her whole week was a project on her own comfort zones. And here she was being asked to dress up and interview people, which was something she really did not like. So discussing with teachers, we can expect a controlled and playful chaos, hopefully. Very different school rules than usual. And yes, we still meet in the morning and we go home in the afternoon. And unless you're inspired to carry on at home, then we do have a beginning of the end of learning. And we can expect to see students failing, struggling, succeeding, celebrating, and most importantly, trying, engaging, learning, and trying. That we are available as coaches in accordance with the preset schedule, and of course to expect the unexpected. And believe me or not, that also happened. So we were discussing a lot what kind of topics lend themselves when students can choose what they want to work with. Here you see some students, they are grade 6 students, so they are like 11 years old. One has done a mind map on Greek mythology, and the other one is looking into the meaning behind flowers, and they are helping each other brainstorm what could be interesting. So in principle, when coaches came to me and said, oh, but what is appropriate topics, and what if they come with this and that? The parameters were that it has to be supported by the ethos of our place and by our mission statement, that it's not dangerous, that at the end of it, we share what we have learned from our project with other students. Of course, it has to be realistic within the time frame and also the physical framework. And it gives the possibilities of learning something new, something you haven't done before, or that you really extend what you have done before. So doing something that you're very comfortable with and you already know a lot about, maybe think that over again. And use your professional judgment. So very roughly the week looked like this. Monday morning, students showed up only armed with their thoughts and ideas through the small provocations in the previous week. They worked the whole morning with planning, and then they planned their whole project week. And at the end of the week, they did a small presentation that they shared with the whole learning community. And they also did presentations for each other in the coaching groups of around 10 students. And in the morning, they met to plan, and in the evening, they met, or afternoon, for the daily reflection. So amongst teachers, we worked a lot with exploring this coaching role. Of course, teachers do not start from zero when we talk about teaching roles versus coaching roles, at least not in our school. But in order for students to be problem solvers, we need to let them try to solve problems on their own and meet the students where they are. So what solutions do you see? What might happen if you? How can you think differently about this? Please do not show and share solutions with students. Make them reach those solutions themselves. So we had workshops on this, and we had discussions on this, of how we're trying to prepare ourselves as coaches to do this the best way possible. So students had access to know when their coaches would be available. There were timetables for all teachers. We can, of course, only ask them to operate within the work time that they usually have. There were teachers sharing with you areas of expertise, hobbies, passions. You can see here some of our teachers are into hiking and Viking reenactments, and others are doing songwriting and Spanish and modern histories and football. And so they could go out and see, oh, if I'm interested in something, who could be a coach I could approach who might have some ideas of how I could develop this project. We had help desks around, and we went around also and interacted with students constantly to hear what they were involved and engaged in. Otherwise, we had our help desks around school, learning help desks. So there were special rules. Here you can see a learning environment. They could bring in their own snacks. Now, I don't know about you, but during lockdown, I found out that when I work at home, I really like to decide when to take my breaks, when to have my cup of tea and my biscuit. And for me, that is really, really important for learning. And in schools, we don't give them that opportunity. They could design their own workspaces. Here you have somebody making a Harry Potter family tree, and it looks a bit like a music festival, I think I've been to once, but they loved it. Even older students, even just because you turn 14, 15 years old, decorating, making small caves around the place. It was gorgeous to see. So they could personalize it, and usually we take phones away. They were allowed to have them as long as they didn't, take pictures of others without permissions and so forth. We had no problems in this concern. They could see different point persons if they wanted to use the biolab or the physics labs or the PE hall or the creator spaces or the 3D printers or visual art rooms or music. And they could see all the different rooms we had in school when they would be available. Here you can see another good example of a cave that happened. They had a lot of really good learning. It looked really good for learning, and you could hear it was very good for learning, but it didn't smell very good for learning, if you ask for my personal opinion in there, especially not after a day. A small snapshot, this is just a small snapshot of some of all the different topics the student chose. Nisser in Danish culture, that's Christmas elves. Making American cookies and sushi. Fashion changes over time. Spike prime programming. evolution of prehistoric creatures, planning a travel to Paris, Lego stop movies, endless amount of extremely engaging and fascinating topics they chose. Gravity and its effect on space. When you leave it up to students, there is no limit for what could be interesting to dive into. When they worked, we spent Monday morning looking at planners. We thought the overall statement of inquiry was what I learn in school matters in the real world and is relevant to my own world because. So they had to justify why is whatever I choose meaningful and relevant to me. They had to argue for their topic. Here's somebody who was very interested in criminal psychology. And they have to answer, why is that interesting? Well, it's relevant because I might be interested in doing something like this in the future, analyzing human behavior and criminal psychology. They wrote statements of inquiries. They asked good research questions. And we work quite a bit with opening up for research questions. So we have factual ones, those we can find an answer for. We have debatable ones, which can't find an answer for, but is more opinion-based. And to really get deeper into learning, of course, also conceptual questions. And there were guidance for this, and there were different ways of asking the students to help opening up for these, because good inquiry starts with really good inquiry questions. They had a planner for the week, in the morning and the afternoon, where they had a small process journal, where they planned their day and they reflected on it at the end. And they were asked to post a meme or emojis or pictures that they represented how they felt about the day. And we thought different elements of playfulness into their reflections. So, keeping track of learning, and all teachers were encouraged to do a piece of documentation. How do we know what learning looks like and feels like when everybody is let loose to pursue their own interests? So here's a small piece of a 1-minute documentation that I took in Creator Space one day with a girl who was sitting looking very excited about something. And she's usually a fairly quiet girl who can be a little bit difficult to read. So I asked her what she was up to.
So what are you looking into this
I'm
week?
looking into 1910, the year 1910 in Canada. So basically my final product is a house that you live in for 3 weeks, and it's more like accurate, and like because there's a show based in 1910, and it's not that accurate, so I'm making a house that's more accurate to what happens in 1910, and it comes with an experience that you can live in for 3 weeks. The first week is just introducing like how they live and how they, you know, like dress and stuff, and then the second week and third week are just like joining this community, and you get to experience the joy of like when the telephone is invented and brought into this small town, and you know, like when cars are beginning to be popular and stuff. So things that we use every day, it's an experience to see how exciting it was when they were first invented.
So being a humanities teacher, I mean, the engagement and the motivation to find out about pre-depression around World War I Europe, diving into it from watching a game show with the parents and thinking authenticity is not what it should be. So her product was a model of a house you could live in that was authentic for the 1910s, and writing a 3-week concept of the different experiences that you could go by living there and experiencing all, you know, the excitement about the television and the invention of the telephone and all those things we take for granted today. So for me, that radiance shows me a small clip, intrinsic motivation, influencing the direction of their own learning, setting goals, novelty, curiosity, imagining, creating, satisfaction, enjoyment, smiling, laughing, and so forth. And this is just a small 1-minute snapshot. We could record over and over and over in this whole week and see so many examples of this with young learners. At the end of the week, they could share their products if they felt like it with others in a long presentation. So you could see there were students who shared music, models they made, tutorials they made, articles they had written, paintings, essays, stories, different apps they had invented, plays and films. And then whether they had a product or not, they had to do a small 2-minute Flipgrid video. And Flipgrid is a video sharing platform where they had to explain about their product for others, so what it was about, what they learned, and the biggest challenges. And then they were given time to go out and explore each other's. You can see here is 121 responses of students who talk about their projects and what they found out. So they had time to go out looking at each other's, commenting on each other's, and sharing with the whole MYP cohort all the fantastic projects they've been going through. So at the end of it, reflections, reflecting back on the whole process, the students designed learning avatars. And here we have an example of Katrine. She's only been with us less than a year, came with very limited English, but now she's capable of designing a learning avatar, finding different visual learning clues that she thinks represent, reflecting on her research skills, on her social skills, self-management skills, communication, and on her thinking skills. And a small playful prompt was then to try to lure one of those out and saying, well, choose one of your research skills from your avatar. What are your thoughts on how developing this skill will help you when you're 30 years old, sitting back in your armchair and drinking a cup of tea or coffee? So here's Katrina who says, well, the research skills will help me when I get 30 because I have to research a lot about how to become a vet, but also when I have to find out what special issue is, for example, when a dog or something like that. So her project was to design healthy horse snacks, and her idea was driven by the desire of her maybe wanting to become a vet one day. So visual learning clues and also playful prompts of how can we try to harness some of those feelings and thoughts and emotions that students have of making lifelong learning more engaging and relevant through a project week. So they were displayed on different boards around school for the weeks afterwards. Here this is one of the several boards that were up, and you will find students congregating around these, sharing, interacting, and looking at the learning avatars, looking at the different learning reflections for weeks afterwards, how you saw themselves as learners. So there was a big group around these boards for many days to follow. Taking away, we thought very long and in-depth about what kind of questions are we interested in knowing more about, and how can we phrase them so that we don't just get answers that really doesn't mean anything or that is not really useful for us. So here's a very few examples of the student feedback. So it opened up with this an overall, how do you feel? And you can see there was one student who gave it a 2 who really felt that this was a hard week. There was about 1/4 who thought, well, it was an all right week. And then we had 75% who thought it was from great to absolutely fantastic. What seems important about what you learned during the week is another thinking question. So of course there were hundreds of answers, but planning what to do before you do it was one. I chose body language, and I found out how your body language should be when I also presented what I learned about body language. I learned more about sewing, about how to organize myself and so forth. And looking at things that they found helpful to do their projects. You can see there was some surprisingly and interesting finds in here. The high score you can see is deciding over your old time. We had more than half of the students pointing out that that was just a key element to their own learning. Curiosity and planning your days are the 2 next biggest ones in there. And what then surprised me is not that they thought that a lot of peers were very helpful. That was like 36% of them. But us coaches who have worked very hard coaching them in this whole week is actually not that high up on the list. There was only about 1/4 of the students who pointed that out. And even though they really enjoyed planning their days, they were also a little bit more skeptical about the use of the actual planner. So there are a few contradictions in here, but some interesting things for us as educators, of course. Teachers' feedback, also to share that very briefly with you, one teacher really struggled with the openness of everything. 1/3 thought it was all right, and again 2/3 thought that it was really, really great. Explaining the ratings, there were voices like, it was super great, unusual role as a coach, but it really worked. Students were relaxed, and it was fun talking to them about their ideas and projects. Enormously engaging and rewarding for staff and students. I saw examples of unique and well-developed projects where students had agency and pride. I only don't offer full marks, as I think a more robust solution to support those not engaged would be the next step. So very, very interesting takeaways also from what teachers think about this, or coaches, as I would call them here. And of course, take away observing how they work, what might be some ideas you can bring with you into your future planning. So allow for more freedom of choice to foster wonder and delight. I feel there are much more scope for students to have more agency in the formative journey. And I would make a bigger effort to connect their topic to the global context in a different way and to come up with a playful provocation about global context topics, maybe in advance. Just small examples of a lot of meaningful answers, not all positive, but that's the realities of life. But that is also really important for us schools to examine ourselves, and in order for us to drive project-based learning like this further on. So we had a student support section set up as well. There were a shortcut to strategies where all the students we knew had barriers to learning. As a coach, I could go out and find shortcuts that briefly outlined all of the students, helpful strategies, supportive things I could do to help them. And all of us had access to that in a closed space, of course. And we also had student support people around who was working on their own timetable, scheduled to help and support those students who needed it and who we knew and anticipated would struggle. So not necessarily students who we knew would struggle academically, but with the openness and freedom of a week like that, we had identified a lot of these on beforehand in our planning meetings. So time is running, and I appreciate all your attention and focus in here. Bringing that with us ahead, of course, is looking at all these reflections, looking at all the thoughts, looking at some of all the documentation, gathering that together. And I would like to see how we can involve students more in the planning, because now the planning framework was, a lot of it was delivered for them. We could consider students reacting to the feedback they gave this year, having them starting by thinking back, and also use meta-reflections, looking at different reflection levels that they had done before. And we could support all learners maybe better, even though we had systems and identified those students, but there are still things that we think that they could use a different kind of support. We could develop our feedback to students based around approaches to learning better, and also maybe our reflection on student feedback better. Formative feedback mainly, but also summative feedback. We could, and I would love to see this, encourage less written reflections. We open it up for students. Please reflect, please make blogs, write different things, but many of them withdraw into what they feel, even though they're not particularly good at it, down to written reflections. So maybe we should sit down to parameters to free up playful imagination in reflections. And of course, rethinking the time frame, could we scale this up? Now we had 1 week, where would it be like? There are some schools who work full time with this that also participate in this workshop. But for us here, it's another color on the palette. It's another tool in the toolbox that adds up to the learningful experiences that are very varied in the school like ISB. So how to scale things up and down, of course, is another interesting question. So how can we make it even more playful? So at the end, rounding off, this was a small example, just a snapshot of one project week that was definitely not born to be a presentation like this, but was an example of how thinking choice, wonder, and delight around playful learning into planning and preparation, both with teachers and students. Execution of the week, both executing it with colleagues and also with the students, and how playful learning also played a role in reflections, both for teachers and for students. So the framework we set up was try to harness the power of playful learning into support lifelong learning skills, and that was sort of the focus. And I hope I sort of managed to show you the focus that I set for myself from the beginning of this presentation, the statement of inquiry, if you like, that establishing parameters for playful learning can help free up playful processes. And this here was just a picture of practice of what that might look like in our local context here at school. So thank you very, very much for listening. It's been a privilege for me to share some of all my thoughts and ideas with all of you.